Well, hello, everybody. Um, I wish very much I was with you, and not just because Vancouver is one of my favorite places in the world. I wish I was there in part because there are people doing such amazing work of all kinds in BC. From my friends like Reuben George and company who have done such an amazing job of trying to block ruinous pipelines to people like Seth Klein figuring out what the future is going to look like. And the Green Jobs Alliance is an awfully important part of this whole process. Um, a little background here. I wrote the first book on climate change for a general audience way back in 1989. We knew it was going to be fairly bad even then. The name of the book was The End of Nature. But we didn't know how fast it was going to happen. And of course, the story since then is that it's happened much faster and on a much larger scale than even the most pessimistic scientists would have expected. Hence the incredible results we see out around the world now, where the Arctic melting at a rapid pace, where so much of the interior forest of the west of this continent ravaged by pine bark beetles and by wildfire, on and on and on. The other thing we didn't know 25 years ago was what we were going to do instead of burning the coal and gas and oil that it took to heat up the planet. We talked about things like solar energy in those days pretty much with our fingers crossed because they weren't really ready for prime time yet. But they are now. The engineers have done their job. The price of a solar panel has dropped 80% in the last 10 years or so. That's amazing. It means that if we wanted to make the transition quickly, we could. We see places around the world, a few that have tried, and the results they demonstrate are spectacular. Denmark generated 49% of its power from the wind last year, which either means that those sly Danes have cornered the world's wind supply, or it means that they have the political will to put to use the technology available to all of us. Part of building that political will is understanding that this transition comes with lots of jobs and good ones attached to it. I wrote a piece last summer where I made a real long effort to talk about, in very specific terms, what the often described sort of World War II style mobilization around climate change might look like. We have a pretty good idea of how much renewable energy we need to build. Mark Jacobson at Stanford and his team have given results for every state and province demonstrating how much of what needs to be obtained. And so that gives us an idea of how many solar panels and wind turbines and things we need to build. And therefore, we can figure out how many factories it requires and so on and so forth. And the result of that story was the bottom line conclusion that though it would stretch us, it's within the realm of the possible. Though it would cost some money, it's far, far less money than trying to deal with the world that is going to happen if we don't deal with climate change. And that it was worth remembering exactly what happened on this continent in the run-up to World War II, which was the 20th century's challenge on this same scale. The war against fascism in Europe required a lot of people dying and killing, which this one doesn't, but it required enormous focus, which this one does. Our ability to move quickly was astonishing. In the U.S., the largest factories ever built in the world were erected in the course of a few months. Within a year, they were producing things like bombers, big complicated piece of machinery that takes 300,000 rivets. There was one coming off the line every hour. If you look at that area around Detroit and Windsor, it was pretty much ground zero for all of that. But every place across this continent, the same basic scale of mobilization kicked in. And it's worth remembering that it's that mobilization that pulled us out of depression and set up the North American prosperity that became the envy of the world. There's no other job-creating possibility on the horizon that's anything like this. The transition onto renewable energy is both necessary and enormous. And if we did it wisely, it would not only produce lots of jobs here close to home. No one's going to put their house on a boat and send it to China to get insulated. It would also set us up for a far more democratic world than the one we now inhabit, a place where people had local control over energy, one of the two great necessities, along with food, of human life. That would be a very different world and a much more tightly knit and strongly connected one, I think, with all kinds of benefits. And that's why I'm so glad that you all there in BC are hard at work on it. And as we have often in the past, we will look to the north and west in order to get good guidance for how to develop this continent. Thank you very much.